I would like to share with you the story of one of my clients, a woman named Heather. Heather first reached out to me last fall because her voice was making her miserable. She told me during our first session together, she said, "I hate my voice. It makes me feel like giving up." To her, whenever she spoke and had to use her voice, she never heard herself. She always heard a stranger's voice. This negative relationship with her voice was impacting her professional life and her personal life. As a high school teacher, Heather was required to use her voice for hours a day, and using her voice for so long every single workday was just wearing her down. She also found herself going out with friends less and going on less dates, and in general, trying to avoid speaking in public as much as possible to preserve her mental health and her physical safety. As a transgender woman, Heather felt like she was always being examined under a microscope, scrutinized for any sign of vulnerability. Based on her previous experiences, she knew that if she spoke and the wrong person overheard her at a bar or in a bathroom, she was opening herself up to harassment, even verbal or physical assault. Ultimately, one day, Heather had a choice to make. She could continue living with this discomfort and this fear, or she could try and take action and gain control over her voice and find a different part of her voice that she felt represented her better. Thankfully, Heather chose the latter option, and that's how she found me. As a speech-language pathologist who specializes in the assessment and treatment of voice disorders, as well as transgender vocal training, I've worked with a number of clients who have been where Heather was that day. It never gets easier to hear people say such negative, visceral things about themselves. And when it comes from a member of the trans community, it particularly strikes home for me. As a member of the community myself, I've heard countless friends and siblings echo these feelings of hopelessness and negative self-talk. Now, personally speaking, I have a fantastic relationship with my voice. Through my background as a voice actor, singer, and performer, I've gained a great deal of vocal flexibility, and so I can make my voice do whatever I need to in order to feel satisfied with it. And thanks to my degree in speech-language pathology, I had the theoretical knowledge and the underlying framework of how to help other people achieve similar levels of flexibility and comfort with their own voices. I found myself in a unique position to help my community, where I felt that they were currently being underserved. Most people, when they produce their voices, they don't think about exactly how it works, I feel like, unless your work revolves around the voice like mine does. And what most people don't realize is that their voice is actually the combination of the interplay of several different systems in the body. And by changing one or more of these aspects, we can change the voice that we produce. We can come up with all sorts of different, what I refer to as different mixes of the voice. And these different mixes can communicate different things about us. Now, the audio that you're about to hear is the combination of two different mixes of Heather's voice. The first mix was recorded during our very first session together before we started working together, so we could establish a baseline of where Heather's voice was coming from. The second recording was recorded on our very last day together before we said our final goodbyes. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
I'm keeping a running list of facts, findings, and feelings that I've come across in my transition. After 6 months, I started feeling a little better about this whole thing and gained a little perspective on the process. Here are the things so far I wish I could share with myself of the not-too-distant past. I know a lot of this is subjective and personal experience, but I'm hoping maybe this can help others just starting out. Please add to this list in the comments if you've got anything.
The difference between these two mixes of Heather's voice is as plain as night and day. Beyond the more directly observable and measurable differences, such as her increase in pitch, the biggest difference that I hear is the happiness in Heather's voice. In that first mix, we can hear just how heavily Heather's voice is weighing on her. It sounds like she's almost slogging through the mud just to get through this paragraph to read. And in that second mix, all of that heaviness is gone. Her voice sounds unencumbered. It sounds free. We had successfully aligned Heather's sound with her soul. But how did Heather get to that last recording from the first? What exactly does transgender vocal training look like? Well, the process can be very different from client to client, but ultimately we are looking at accomplishing three main things. One, increase a client's vocal flexibility and their stamina. Two, find a mix of their voice that they prefer to their default voice that they feel like represents them better. And three, instilling that new mix into their muscle memory so that by the time they're using this voice in conversation, they barely even have to think about their voice at all. When Heather and I first began working together, she had a lot of walls built up around her voice. As unhappy as her voice made her, it was still somewhat of a safe harbor for her. And moving outside of that known area of her voice to something she didn't know, uncharted waters, required a tremendous act of bravery and courage on her part. It was something that we needed to work up to, something that I needed to earn from her. And so, to begin getting her body in motion, we started with some very basic breathing exercises. And I would like everyone watching this video to join along with these breathing exercises, if you're open to it. If you don't, that's fine, I won't catch you. Go ahead and take in a nice big inhale in through your nose, down into your belly, and then out through your mouth. Inhale and exhale. Ah, that feels so good. We're gonna do another one real quick. Inhale and exhale. That was more for my nervousness than for y'all, but hopefully you found some good out of it. So, if we are taking these nice deep breaths, we are slowing down our heart rate. We are providing our brains with more oxygen, and this can help decrease the anxiety and the fear that we can feel. And if we are taking these nice deep breaths, it's really not asking too much to add just a gentle sigh to that exhale. So go ahead and try that out. Take in a nice deep breath, and then let out a sigh. The voice that we hear is the result of a small apparatus in our throat, the larynx. There are two folds of muscle in the larynx that are brought together when we want to produce our voice. As air comes up from underneath, these sheets of muscle are pushed apart, and then they are sucked back together again and pushed apart and sucked back together in this sort of oscillating motion here. And as air passes through those oscillators, the air is set into motion. It starts to vibrate. And that is what we perceive as pitch. The faster the vibrations, the higher the pitch that we hear, and the slower the vibrations, the lower the pitch that we hear. So, we are producing our voice, we are exhaling from the lungs, that air is being set into vibrations in the larynx. Before it travels out into the environment and into our ears, it passes through our resonating cavities, our oral cavity and our nasal cavity. And based on the size and shape of those cavities, certain parts of that sound signal are amplified, other parts are reduced, and that's what results in each person's unique texture of their voice. Everyone's oral cavity and nasal cavity is unique, and that's how we can tell one person's voice from another. You can think about these differences in the size and shape of these resonating chambers as the difference between a violin and a cello. Now, the violin and cello, they're relatively the same shape, but because of the drastic difference in size of these instruments, the quality, the timbre, the resonance of the sound produced is drastically different. The sound produced by the cello, because of this large resonating cavity, is warm and rich. You can almost physically feel it more than you can hear it. Inversely, for the violin, the resulting sound is bright, it is piercing, it soars over the rest of the orchestra. And we can achieve similar qualities in our own voices by modifying the size and shape of our mouths. So we can look at if we want to achieve darker, richer qualities in our voice, we can increase the size of our mouths, and this results in that darker, richer mix of our voice. If we want to look at lightening up the voice, we can decrease the size of the oral cavity, and this results in some of these brighter, thinner qualities I referred to, somewhat similar to the violin. So, through transgender vocal training, we look at modifying these three different aspects of voicing: breath flow, pitch, and resonance. We look at modifying them discreetly in structured therapeutic tasks, but we can also make broad sweeping changes through more general vocal play. And vocal play is one of my favorite things about this work, possibly because of my voice acting background, but also it's incredibly helpful for clients because the goal is less to find their perfect ideal voice that represents them, and it's more about just playing around with these silly different characters. And we can often access some of these qualities that we're looking to play around with in our voices a little bit easier through this more general play. So some examples, if we're looking to access some of that darker, richer resonance, we may look at adapting the voice of an opera singer or a giant, right? Fee, fi, fo, fum. And that often helps people just instinctively tap into those darker, richer qualities. Inversely, if we're looking to play around with some bright resonance, we may look at like a cheerleader character or like a Valley Girl-ish character. And oftentimes when you tell people, what does a cheerleader sound like? Or what is your mental image of a cheerleader? They often go for this brighter, thinner resonance just right off the bat. And that's just one method of voice exploration that we use. Depending on a client's individual background with their voice and their goals, we may look at a variety of different techniques. We may look at incorporating some singing techniques if they have that background or if they're interested in gaining that skill set. We may look at employing some imagery and metaphor to help these clients describe how these different voices sound and feel to them as they produce them. We may even use some more traditional vocal rehabilitation methods and strengthen some muscles so that it's easier for them to access these different parts of their voice without as much strain or tension. No matter the methods involved, when we're first starting off, we start on a very simple level of voice production. It's one thing to toss a client a paragraph of Romeo and Juliet and say, all right, go ahead and read this and let's go ahead and play around with your voice. That could be very intimidating for some people. And so we look at starting on a much smaller scale, playing around with individual vowel sounds. So for example, if we're looking to modify the oo vowel, if we want to keep pitch the same but modify resonance, that might sound like ooh, ew, ooh, ooh. Once a client feels comfortable with that much simpler level of voice production, we can increase the complexity. We might put that vowel into a single syllable word context. So again, if we're talking about that ooh vowel, the word might be mood. So mood, 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 mood. And once they feel comfortable there, we may move up to multisyllabic words. Once they're comfortable there, we move up to 3 to 4 word short phrases. And the reason that we structure it this way is that by the time they're using their voice in conversation, their muscles are so used to this action that it's a lot easier to produce with a lot less thought. So that's how we address the mechanical aspects of this work. However, there's another piece that we've barely touched on that is integral to a client making progress and being happy with the end result. And that is how we help a client figure out what sound aligns with their sense of self the best. This can be a tricky thing for a number of reasons, the main reason being that when they first come to me, the client may not fully know themselves at that point. And as they move further in their transition and learn more about themselves and they're exposed to new things, what they want to communicate about themselves may change. Another speed bump that we can encounter is that oftentimes clients put way too much power and responsibility in my hands. They maybe even subconsciously expect that I will tell them how to sound female, which is understandable. I mean, I am the voice professional in the relationship, but it completely overlooks just how important that client's feedback is to this entire process. Because ultimately, I'm not going to be hearing their voice for the rest of my life. They are. And so ultimately, their happiness, their satisfaction with the sound matters way more than my professional opinion about what sounds good or what sounds like the voice that they should produce. And so we try and counteract this by addressing these concerns up front. We discuss expectations from both the client and myself about what's going to happen during this process. So from the very beginning, we make sure that the client understands that this is a partnership between us. It's going to take just as much commitment from them and exploration on their own time as it will take from me during our weekly sessions. And so daily practice is another huge critical component of this piece. They need to take home what we discuss during our sessions and practice, try out a bunch of different mixes of their voice, and hopefully come back to our next session having made a ton of progress on their own. Now, Heather was a model client in this regard. Whenever she would come in for a session, she would be all excited and share some anecdotes about the positive experiences that she had with her voice from the previous round of independent practice, as well as a couple areas where she felt a little bit less successful. And that was perfect. That was fantastic, because then we knew exactly what to focus on during our sessions together. I think the biggest breakthrough for Heather came when she first heard her laugh. I think the biggest breakthrough for Heather came when she first heard herself laugh in her authentic voice for the first time. I could still clearly picture her facial expression as she looked at me with tears brimming in her eyes, and she said, "That's me. That's my voice." And from that first moment of gender euphoria, that eureka moment, she was unstoppable. Heather took our work and she ran with it. She started using her voice in as many contexts as she felt comfortable. She started practicing around her friends, her family members, trusted allies at her workplace. And once she started using her voice more socially in these safe environments, she started to branch out her usage of that to every aspect of her life. She started talking to strangers with it and completing calls with it. And ultimately, at that point, she really didn't need to concentrate on her voice at all, because it was so set into her muscle memory. And because she wanted to use it, because it made her so happy. So if you at home are watching this video and any part of Heather's story is resonating with you, I would highly encourage you to reach out to a voice professional, because you shouldn't have to live with that discomfort. Be like Heather and take charge. Thank you so much.